I am privileged and proud to be a co-sponsor of a program that the Chicago State University's criminal justice program is sponsoring concerning domestic violence. The university has a deep and abiding concern about domestic violence as it affects not just our students, but as it affects the African American community. I am delighted and so proud to have a group of panel participants with me tonight to discuss this issue of domestic violence. And I am extraordinarily proud to have my co-worker and one of my mentors, Dr. Attorney Marion Perkins, the former chair of the Department of Criminal Justice at Chicago State University. Marion, first of all, welcome, and then we're going to get around to the rest of our guests. On behalf of Chicago State, I'm glad to see you.
I'm glad to see you as well, Lou.
All right,
Hello,
thank you. And we have Alberta Pyle. Alberta runs the Phoenix Center, which is a center, and she's going to tell you about it tonight, that deals with domestic violence. She deals with women who have been victimized by domestic violence. She's involved in training. She's involved in education and policy on this issue, and she's going to be telling you a little bit about what she does tonight. Mary, I want to start off tonight.
Thank you, Lou.
And between you and Alberta, I think this part of the program, a lot of people don't know what domestic violence is. And for those of you who need to know, in October of this past year, it was the National Domestic Violence Month. Mm-hmm. And we have been doing programs at Chicago State on this issue. But let's talk a little bit and tell the public what is domestic violence and why are we here tonight and what are some of the things that we're trying to get people to know.
Okay, domestic violence, first of all, is a crime. But it was not a crime in Illinois until 1986. In early America, a man could actually beat his wife, and it was called the rule of thumb law. As long as his thumb, it wasn't, the hit wasn't real a whole lot, the rule of thumb, the husband was allowed to beat the wife. And it primarily was because the man's home is his castle, men and the men were in charge of everything, and so if the woman was disobedient, then the man had the right to beat her. Those days are long gone. However, those types of psychological thinking still impact today, and so that's why we're here. But it is a crime. It's a crime if you are dating someone, if you are married to someone, if you are an ex-wife or ex-husband, former wife, if you have a child together, if you are a same-sex relationship, if you are even living together, sometimes people are actually living together as roommates. All of that category falls under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act. And if you hit someone, you have physical contact with them, and they fall under the Illinois Domestic Violence Act, then it's possible that a person could be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
So we want to start out by telling the public, this issue of domestic violence is a legal one, and it all, under certain circumstances, it carries with it certain penalties, including incarceration and jail. Let me say this as a lawyer, deadly is a mild word, it's a very serious word. And I've been involved in situations where it has been deadly. I've been, most recently we were involved in a situation where a young lady came to a seminar, and 4 days before, her boyfriend had beat her 2-year-old child to death. And if that was not a case of domestic violence, in fact, he was being prosecuted, of course she was torn, hurt, emotionally distraught, and all of the problems that go with such a horrendous thing that had happened to her. But it's very much real. Attorney Perkins, you've had a chance to prosecute these cases.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about domestic violence law, and we'll come back to you, and then we'll go to Alberta and talk about some of the remedies and some of the things that women who are victims, some of the things that they can do and the services that are available, including, let's start with the courtroom.
Yes.
And by the way, I saw that you got an award from the State's Attorney's Office.
Oh, yes,
you
I
know,
did.
for outstanding advocacy. Congratulations.
Oh, okay,
Thank you.
All right,
congratulations.
Doctor. All right, I'm gonna call you Attorney Dr. Perkins.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and the law does provide a remedy. The law does provide a remedy for domestic violence victims. Now, what's important to know is this. Once the police when the police come, the police are mandated now to make an arrest. It used to be in the 1970s, yes, that if a victim called the police, then the police would basically just walk the person around in the police car and basically kind of, hate to say it, we have a male police officer, a male accuser, and they would kind of say, you know what, I think she's kind of crazy, almost the law enforcement kind of getting in cahoots with the accuser. Today, it's a mandatory arrest and it's a mandatory 3-day stay-away order. And that is even if the man is paying the bills or his name is on the house, there is going to be a 3-day stay-away order. This is really a cooling off period. The other thing too is that the law wants to let that accuser know that it is a crime because so many people really do not think that it is a crime. They do not realize that it's a violation of the law. And sometimes I've actually seen defendants in court. They're squinting, they're like, wow, this is like a courtroom like the other courtrooms? Yes, and so it is domestic violence court where they wanted to kind of just put all of those cases together versus having them incorporated with some of the other criminal cases, and we have found that that was a very, very good thing to do. But anyway, the person is arrested and they're prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and a person can get up to 364 days in county jail, $2,500 fine. But I think the most important thing as well is also for the defendant to get the counseling. And now we try to even add restorative justice to domestic violence in 2016, where the defendant has to also say, I am sorry for what I have done. Once he has gone through the counseling and realized what he has done, because that's when you have the breakthrough, when the person realizes that they have committed a crime, not only against this person, but children might have been present, other family members were affected, and this particular accused person, he may be then off of his job. It can have a barrage of things that can occur.
Alberta, let me lead into you. So tell me a little bit about, you are licensed to do a domestic violence counseling. A victim, somebody who has been abused, comes to you as a professional.
Yes.
What are some of the things you say to them? What are some of the things that you do to help them, to aid them? What are some of the recommendations that you make to them? I think that's important. I think our audience certainly would want to hear what some of the outcomes are if they did seek counseling.
Right. And I believe that the first thing that should happen is there should be no judgment. You shouldn't judge the woman because she decides she wants to stay with the abuser. You also have to be attentive, listen to what she's saying, show that there is someone who really cares about what's going on. I find that most women really receive this, and they're really apt to open up more when you show that you are really listening to what's going on.
Ms. Coffey, but you mean to tell me that you go in and you tell a woman, you know what, you don't have to leave after she's just been beaten, or she's just been, you would say to her, you know what, I understand why you don't want to leave, so go get another beating. Now I'm being provocative, but this actually happens.
Yes, they go back.
I've had to counsel people myself. I run a domestic violence clinic myself for about 2.5 years. But so what do you tell them, man? You tell them, how do you, get them out of that dilemma?
Well,
Ms. Coffey?
I think it's important for us to realize that none of us is going to offer a victim 24-hour protection.
That's right.
They've got to make the best decision for themselves and oftentimes for their children. And when you and I go home and when the police go home, they still have to deal with the situation at hand. So I think when Alberta says that we need to be non-judgmental, that we need to be aware of the fact that there are limitations to what we do. And so we need to respect the decisions that victims make. No, we're not saying as counselors or as clinicians to the victim, no, just go home and get another beating. But what we are saying is that we are going to share options and information with you so that, one, you can gain insight yourself into the impact that domestic violence is having on you and the impact that domestic violence is having on your family.
Now, you know, because we're closing down on time. If you had to, if speaking, you know, to victims of domestic violence, and you had to give them a 1, 2, 3 about something that they should do or should not do, and of course you can't talk about it all night. What are some of the things that you would each say to them? Some of the things you would suggest to those who are watching this program tonight, women who have been victims, and they're looking for some answers now. What do you think?
I would, I would say get help. Don't try and get the solution yourself. Find someone to help you, to listen to you, to give you resources. There are places to go. There's people to talk to, but don't try and solve the problems by yourself.
So your answer is reach out. One of you reach out.
Yes.
Reach out, and not only reach out, but take action, some level of action that you feel that you can take. It may be something as simple as teaching your children how to dial 911.
That's good. Take action.
Yes.
Reach out. The law is there, and you got to avail yourself of those remedies, you know, which are there. And you can call the police, and the person will be arrested. You can get an order of protection, which would keep him away from you during a certain period of time, if it's a woman. Keep him away from your children, if in fact they are the victims of the abuse. These things are important.
1 month or 2? 5. Certainly, darling. Look what you did. What? You spilled. I'm sorry. It's just a little bit. Here you go again. Sorry. What can I do? You can't do anything because you can't do anything right. I don't know what to... Just shut up. Say it with an F in your teeth.
Ms. Coffey, let's talk a little bit about what the family rest, some of the services that you actually offer. Some people might want to know, where do we come tomorrow? Or who do we contact if we're having some of these problems? You know, and what do you have to offer? That would be so helpful, I think, to the audience.
Well, the first thing is we are able to accept a victim's calls 24/7. We have
So they can call you anytime, day or night. You got a hotline number.
We have a hotline number, 773-375-8400.
Say it one more time.
773-375-8400.
And if they call that number, what would they ask for, or what should they say?
They can say whatever they want to say. What they're going to get is a person on the other end who understands what they're going through, who will listen, and who will have information available for them. If they are in immediate danger, they will either accept them into our shelter, or if we have space, or work with them to get them into a shelter.
If people are listening to the program and they call that number, and particularly if they feel that their lives or their well-being may be in danger, you can call that number, and for the lack of a better word, you can get some rescue help. You have somebody who can direct you somewhere, you know, for the moment to help you with your situation.
That's right. I want to talk very briefly about the program that we have right now with, in collaboration with the Chicago Police Department, the State's Attorney's Office, and Family Rescue. Officers in 3rd District and 4th District have been trained to do domestic violence risk assessments. So when they go on the scene and they are talking to the victim, they actually complete this assessment, which they then send to Family Rescue to a secured site, and our advocates rank those assessments in terms of elevated risk or non-elevated risk, and then they will call those victims back within 24 hours in most cases and talk to them. And it's important because if you are in a domestic violence situation and you've been in it for a while, you may not have a true understanding of how much danger you're actually in. You have a tendency to minimize and to downplay and perhaps have become desensitized to that danger. And there are things that happen. If you've ever been choked, if you've been stalked, if there are guns in the house, if your significant other, your partner, the abuser, you have children in that home that is not that person's children. These things elevate domestic violence in the home, actually, and you may be more in danger. We actually talk to victims who have had all sorts of things that have happened, and they do not have a true understanding of the amount of danger they're in.
What do you tell them? I mean, you have a service, and you can give personal counseling. They can call you at a number, and you can talk about some of the things that they may want to have an individual private time discussion. Is that right?
Yes, at this time, we don't have a number they can call. We would rather have them call Family Rescue. However, we are getting my numbers together for my agency, and that's going to be available within another month or two. However, I'm in agreement with Ms. Coffey is that you have to be very careful about when you would want to leave the relationship, because, as I said before, when he feels that he's losing the power and control, this is the most dangerous time for a woman. She needs to be very cognizant of what's going on in her household and pay attention to all the signs that are available, because she needs to call the police for her safety. If she feels like her life is in danger, call the police. Do not wait. Don't minimize it.
Attorney Perkins, tell us, what, as a university, and you and I have been talking about this issue for a long time.
Yes, we have.
One of the things, we're looking forward to starting in New York and putting together a women's program at Chicago State University to address some of these issues. And I'm sure you'll be coming back to speak to some of our students. But what's the vision that you see Chicago State and the role that we can play in this problem?
I think that we can play a role in terms of education, information, and letting people know that the university cares. That sometimes people may think that we're in an ivory tower or something like that, but that we care very, very much about the community, and we are aware too that children and teenagers are affected by domestic violence. So the children who are seeing domestic violence could be then, when they're teenagers, in the dating relationships. We've talked a lot about adults. We've talked a lot about, basically, domestic violence court is for adults. But there is juvenile court. And juveniles who engage in domestic violence, they go over to 1100 South Hamilton as well. And we've got to remember that, unfortunately, it starts young. So we are educating college students and we're educating the community, but we actually need to actually go out to the high schools, because it's a very, very serious situation. So we bridge the gap so that we have all of the generations. We feel that sometimes there's a generation gap, but there's not a generation gap when it comes to domestic violence. You talked about your mom in her 70s, 17-year-olds domestic violence, and then 7-year-olds who are then seeing domestic violence.
And I like
all
the
need to come
idea,
together.
Ms. Coffey and Alberta, of going into these high schools,
Right.
going into the elementary schools. These kids are not too young to be taught and given some direction about what's happening even in their home lives. Because sometimes they lack the ability to explain the horrors of the house. And they just don't walk in one day. And sometimes it takes people like you to come in and make sense of this so they can have a better understanding.
We had a violence prevention program for many years, and with the budget crisis that we're under and loss of funding, we no longer have that program. But what I will say is that young women between the ages of 18 and 24 are at the highest risk. They suffer domestic
Why
violence.
that age?
Don't know why. I just know that this is what the research has shown. Young women between the ages of 18 and 24 are at the highest risk and suffer domestic violence and sexual assault at rates much higher than other age groups. When you talk about going into the schools, we were all the way from 3rd grade through high school when we were offering our domestic violence prevention program. And it is critical. The thing is, Mary, you talked about that our young people are seeing these things.
Yeah.
Children are very astute. They learn from us. They learn very well about domestic violence. And when you have young children in the home, especially boys, who have watched domestic violence, they are 700 times more likely to abuse a partner when they begin, either in adolescence or when they're grown.
So they
And
really
if they've been
perpetuate the
abused
violence. Right.
themselves,
It's a
it's
continuum.
1,000 times
Yeah. It's a
greater.
continuum.
That's
And
right.
you have to remember too that domestic violence is still the family secret. They don't want it to get out in public, and that has to stop. I don't know how.
But I think doing programs, one of the things we do, and we have to do, and we're doing here, is that we have to let people know it's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right to talk. No, we're not asking you to stand up before 10,000 people and, say, this is what happened to me. But at some point, like anything else, like going to a priest or going to a preacher, at some point, you're going to have some counseling about where you are, what you're doing, and what can be done, for the lack of a better term, Attorney Perkins, what salvation can you get? And salvation is right around the corner, and you're seeing some of it right in front of you today. I am so proud, that we're having this discussion, because I want particularly the women that we see every day on college campuses, on our college campus, and I'm not ashamed to say I am sure that there are people who are in faculty positions
Right, the faculty.
and people who are in administrative
Administrators,
positions
staff,
who themselves
everybody.
may have been victims of domestic violence, but they haven't felt comfortable enough to share it beyond the intimacy of a friendship,
Right.
and to share it professionally. And what you offer, through family rescue, is a private, really setting that they can come in and talk about it and get some help without the burden of feeling that I've had to tell the world something to give them direction. So what do you suggest that we do in terms of the college campus? What is it that we should do on the college campus to encourage women to have dialogue and discussion?
I suggest you continue to hold the workshops. The first one that we had, I felt was very successful. And I'm looking forward to working with Chicago State to have other workshops. Get the word out. Let them know that there is a safe place, and that's the key word, safe,
Right.
that they can come and talk to somebody.
We intend to have classes. As we go back, our first planning meeting, Attorney Perkins, is January 17th.
Yes.
Right.
We're going to get all of the players in
Players.
the room, and we're going to talk about what we're going to do in end of January, February, March, and April. We want to have one event around women's issues
Yes.
on that campus
That's extreme.
until we close out school
Yes.
in May of 2017.
Exactly, and to let them
so
know that
that's
Chicago
right.
State is a safe place, and we can maybe even find a little small place on the campus where people can come and deal with those
deal with these
issues.
kinds of issues, because they're very important. And long term, and I tell this story, I was traveling in a foreign country a few years ago over in North Africa, and a person told me something. I was walking down a boulevard, and this was a city that was on an ocean, and he said, you look into the eyes of the youth and you can see the future of a generation. If you look into the eyes of the youth and see fear and terror and horror, that tells you the future does not look good.
Exactly.
If we as academicians and professionals, if we can do something to plant the seed in the eyes of the young people that we're working with, and in the eyes of older people, who are the parents and the siblings of young people, we would have made a tremendous accomplishment.
Yes.
And I thank you so very much, because this is very important. So I'm going to extend an invitation to you right now to come, not just on January 17th, but when we give you our schedule, I'm going to certainly ask you to come back and talk about rescue, talk about Phoenix, and we'll talk about the future of young black America in the context of this problem of violence. Again, thank you so very much. And I've enjoyed having you. And I look forward to seeing you in January 2017.
Thank you.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Okay. Daddy is the sweetest daddy in the world. Daddy is the most handsome, the smartest, the most clever, the kindest. He is my Superman. Daddy wants me to do well at school. Daddy is just great, but he lies. He lies about having a job. He lies about having money. He lies that he's not tired. He lies that he's not hungry. He lies that we have everything. He lies about his happiness. He lies because of me.